Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and remember, Context is Everything Media Network founder and CEO John Michael is reading a textbook again, cover to cover. This is a 1940 American history textbook, whereas the previous was a 2001 world history textbook. Chapter 8, Section 3, Inventions and Discoveries, the Railroad and the Telegraph. The coming of the iron horse. Horse car on rails. The first car in American railroads were horse cars. They were simply old stagecoaches mounted on rails. These coaches were pulled by horses. The first rails were made of wood with thin strips of iron nailed to the top of the rails. The horse car railroad did not last long, except in cities. A steam locomotive had been invented. John Stephenson, an Englishman, was the first to put an engine on a steam boiler on wheels. His locomotive ran on rails and pulled a train of cars. A machine that moves under its own power is called a locomotive. Soon as Stephenson's locomotives were brought to America, later Americans began to build locomotives. Early trains. A trip on one of these old trains was very interesting, but hardly comfortable. Passengers who could not pay much rode on flat cars. These were platforms mounted on wheels. The passengers sat on rude pine benches. The richer people rode in coaches, much like the old stage coaches. The locomotives were small and could not move faster than 15 miles per hour. Even at that, the people were often terrified at such great speed. Railroads and prosperity. Perhaps the railroad has done more than any other invention to make our country rich. At first, only a few wise people realized how important railroads would be. Charles Carroll, the cousin of the great Archbishop Carroll, firmly believed in the railroads. As a very old man, he turned the first sod in the building of Baltimore into the Ohio Railroad. This act, he said, is the most important of my life, next to the signing of the Declaration of Independence. He realized that the railroad was to make many changes in American life. The Telegraph. Samuel F.B. Morse. The telegraph is useful to us in many ways. This book is written in 1940. Messages between businessmen or between friends are sent by telegraph. News is sent by telegraph to newspapers. Railroad trains could hardly run unless the telegraph brought the message to clear tracks. Right. All this seems very natural to us in 1940. It is hard for us to understand why the inventor of the telegraph had to struggle so long to prove what a useful thing it was. The inventor was Samuel F.B. Morse, winning aid from Congress. After years of hard work, Morse had his telegraph in fair working order. Then he asked the aid of Congress. Morse set up a telegraph and showed it to members of Congress. They were interested, but looked on the telegraph more as a toy than anything of importance. Congress would give no money for the telegraph. A few years later, Morse again went before Congress. This telegraph was now fine working order. He asked for $30,000 to build a line from Washington to Baltimore. The House of Representatives voted to give the money. Then the bill had to pass the Senate. The final day of the session, came and the Senate had not acted. All day Morse waited and hoped. Failure meant ruin for him. At last he was told that nothing would be done. With a heavy heart, Morse went home. He awakened the next morning and was told that all was well. The last minute of the session, Senate voted to give Morse necessary money to build the telegraph line. If you're enjoying this content, please subscribe. Number 1 in canine viewership. If you're away from your dog, life brings you away sometimes. Put on a playlist from the Context is Everything Media Network and let your dog hear a soothing voice. I've been told I have a soothing voice. I'm not making that claim myself. The first message. It took a year to build the first telegraph line, which was 40 miles long. The telegraph was first used in 1844. Then Morse set up his instrument in the Supreme Court in Washington. He flashed the message to Baltimore. What hath God wrought? Morse had done a wonderful thing. All his sufferings were forgotten. Today, his little line of 40 miles has grown to a network of about 2,400,000 miles of telegraph lines in the United States alone. This is a book from 1940. This book's from 1940. Cyrus W. Field and the Atlantic Cable. It would be very useful to be able to telegraph to Europe. News and messages took a long time to cross the ocean by ship. Cyrus W. Field had the idea of laying a telegraph or cable under the Atlantic Ocean. His first cable was laid in the year 1858. It soon broke, but others were put down. Now cables carry across messages in the Atlantic and the Pacific and Indian Oceans. Very interesting. Very outdated, but that's why it's interesting. That's it. Quick one. God bless. Goodbye. Have a good day.